The interesting thing about this picture, and it's kind of out of focus and it maybe doesn't look like much, but that little house off to the side here is what we now call Settler's Cottage. When the new Village Hall was built, one of the things that they did was to look at the old buildings that were going to be torn down to see if any of them were of historic significance. And the architect who did that said that one of them was a real treasure, that although it looked kind of insignificant, that it was built around 1840. And he said, if you're going to try and save anything, you should try and save this little house, because settlement in Montgomery started around 1835. So to have this house that was built in 1840, it's right from the very beginning of Montgomery's history. This is the main room of the cottage, and this is a very small building. It's only like 20 by 20. This is the master bedroom. And when I introduce this to people as the master bedroom, everybody, it's just mind-boggling, right? There's no closets. There's barely room for a full-size bed. It's just so much smaller than what we're used to. And so, very different, just less than 100 years ago. And life was so different than what it is for us now. The next picture is of Gray's Mill back in the days when it was kind of dilapidated, and they were considering that they might even have to tear it down at one point because it had fallen into disuse, and we're so glad that we still have it. It's just kind of the icon of the community, sitting here right on what was the main busy corner of industry and commerce in Old Montgomery. Right now we're in the basement, the lower level of Gray's Mill, and this is the only building in Montgomery that's on the National Register of Historic Places. It was built in 1853 by Daniel Gray, who was the founder of Montgomery, and it's 5 stories high, and it was built as a flouring mill, so they would grind grain here and make flour, or at least crack the grain to be used however they wanted to. And although this is the only mill remaining and it's the most famous of our mills, this was the last mill to be built in Montgomery. On this mill race that extended north from here, there were other mills that were built earlier. All of these mills operated on water power. They didn't have electricity back then. And so there were turbines, and the flowing water would make the turbines spin underwater. And then there'd be a pole that would go up above the water that would be attached to machinery. And that operated all kinds of machinery in those factories. The 3 or 4 mills that were built north of Mill Street were built in the 1840s, and then this was Daniel Gray's crowning achievement. It was the biggest of the mills, and it was built around 1853. And he passed away in 1855. We always speculate and wonder, gosh, what would he have done if he had lived longer? But he was the driving force behind the founding of Montgomery and the platting of the town and all the construction and the development that happened here. In the 1930s, by then, the mills had all ceased operation, fallen into disrepair, and during the Depression, when they had the WPA, they sent men to work in Montgomery, and they used the stones from those mills for a WPA project, and they did a lot of rehabilitation in the park. They dumped a lot of the old building materials and stuff into the mill race to fill it in. And then they used a lot of the stones to build a big retaining wall along the river. And that's still there today. It's smaller, some of it has washed away, but you can still see the wall there today. And in fact, when you stand at the corner of Mill Street and River, you can still see the depression in the middle of the park, where the soil has settled and everything, but that's where the mill race ran right through the middle of the park and all the factories were built. And so this WPA project turned the area into a park that, 100 years later we still have as Montgomery Park. But I moved here in 1996, and my husband grew up in Montgomery, lived here all his life, always talked about what a great town it was. He loved his childhood, but there had never been a historical society in Montgomery. We ended up working together to form the Historic Preservation Commission that we have now. and they started working on collecting historic photos and just providing a place for people to donate things. One cool thing that we have is, Daniel Gray is the founder of Montgomery. Daniel Gray's son, Ralph Gray, was the first village president of Montgomery. And this is the family Bible of Ralph Gray and his wife, Amelia Gray. And so in the cover it says, Amelia Gray's Bible, presented to her by her husband, Ralph Gray, with the date of 1851. So it's really cool that we have this, and they held it in their hands almost 200 years ago, 175 years ago? It's really cool, and I'm a genealogist, and so I was working on researching the Gray family tree and the history and where they came from. They came from Montgomery County, New York. And as I was researching, I found somebody had a family tree online for him, and they said they have the Gray family Bible. And they had just found this Gray family Bible at some thrift shop or something and bought it because they hated to think that it would be thrown away. So now we have the Bible back here that was from the first village president.